But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to kick us off. I've got 10 o'clock, so we're going to get started. So again, welcome everybody. This is Scaling Up. This is the A-player strategy, and this is really about how to implement Who, which is a curriculum that we use to help our clients attract, engage, and develop A-players. And I am a Scaling Up coach. I'm based here in the Dallas area. And this is me and Vern Harnish, who's the author of Scaling Up. And so the principles that I'm going to share with you today, in addition to being included in the book Who, which I'll tell you a little bit more about in a minute, they're also talked about in Scaling Up. It's Mastering the Rockefeller Habits 2.0. But it's based on, Scaling Up is based on 4 fundamental decisions that a leader must get right in order to scale up that S curve and to go from a startup to a mid-size to a large company. And those 4 decisions are: number 1, people. And this is, do I have a harmonious culture of accountability? And think about this question: would I enthusiastically rehire everybody again if given the chance? And that's a tough question, but it causes us to think about the quality of the people that are around us. But that's one of the 4 decisions. The second is strategy. We do a lot of work with our clients to help them with their strategy, and you can tell if you have a good strategy because you're experiencing top-line revenue growth and you're experiencing expanding margins. A good strategy gives you pricing power in the marketplace. We talk about execution. How do we take that gross margin that's delivered out of the strategy and deliver it to the bottom line? By removing drama. So are all your processes running drama-free and creating industry-leading profitability and cash flow to the bottom line? And then the 4th decision is cash. The key thing with cash is you don't want to run out of it. You can survive with a decent strategy, decent people, decent execution. You can't live a day without cash. But more strategically, how can you learn to scale your business by generating extra cash so you grow your business with customer-funded dollars? And so those are the 4 areas that we work with our clients. Today, we're going to focus on people. This is all about the people decision. And Jack Welch, I think he said it great when he said, hiring good people is hard. Hiring great people is brutally hard. Yet nothing matters more in winning than getting the right people on the field. It starts first with great people. Vince Lombardi said it's impossible to win without great people. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. And so my objectives, I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about the state of the American workforce. I'm going to raise some awareness. Maybe you've thought about this. I find a lot of my clients and potential clients have not, but what are bad hires really costing me? What's the financial impact of bad hires? And then I'm going to introduce you to a process. And it's a process, an A-player strategy for attracting, hiring, onboarding, engaging, and developing A-players. And the A-player strategy, you'll see I pepper a lot of questions throughout here, but here's a question to ask yourself: do I have the best talent in the market for the pay that I am willing to offer? And if you're anything less than yes, this strategy can help you close that gap. This is about getting the best and brightest for your comp structure on board to help you achieve your mission. So as I mentioned earlier, it's based on a curriculum that was written by a guy named Jeff Smart. Jeff Smart is the son of a guy named Brad Smart. And if you've read Scaling Up, you know, we talk about top grading all throughout the people section. Brad Smart worked for Jack Welch at GE, helped develop their hiring and their talent development strategy. When Jack retired and Brad left, he created his own consulting firm called Top Grading, and Jeff is his son. And so I'm going to reference both of these, almost, I sometimes get them confused, but for my scale-up clients, so middle market firms that are starting to really grow, I highly recommend Who is the best place to get started. I believe it's really written for you. As you mature, as you become more comfortable, as you want to take your precision to the next level, then I think Top Grading is a great resource. Now, some of you are overachievers and you'll go get both of these, and that's fantastic. And I'll tell you, through our online curriculum, we offer some additional training courses. You can get certified with both Top Grading and with Who. And these are all things that I recommend. If you're really serious about building a great organization, you've got to get great people. And so these are resources that you can leverage. So let's start off talking about something that hurts a little bit, and that is, what is the cost of a typical mishire? So when you mess up, what is it costing you? And this is a quote from Brad Smart, Top Grading. He said, in our Top Grading books, we show the cost to range for various jobs from 1 to 27 times base salaries. That's an annualized base salary. So at a minimum, it's probably costing you 1 times their base salary every time you have a mishire in that job. And it says, and your doubter will be amazed at how time consuming it is to sweep up after a typical mishire. And I've gone through some of these with clients, and they're ugly, and they're expensive, and they're time consuming, and they're distracting, and they keep you from achieving your mission as a leader of your organization. Now, Brad has a form on his website, and it's called the Cost of a Mishire form. And I think this is a great discipline to put in place when you lose somebody. Go in and fill this out and say, what'd that mishire cost us? What'd that non-performing employee cost me? And don't just think of the cost of running an ad or working with a recruiting firm to hire a new person. Think of lost productivity. Think of your lost time, lost focus, lost revenue. When you start, organizational impact to the culture, when you start stacking these up, you're going to quickly realize that what Brad's saying here in 1 to 27, I mean, man, these people are costing me 5, 10, 15 times their base salary by the time I look at all the costs that are involved with these mishires. So your non-performing staff. So let's just run some numbers for the fun of it. And you can do these at home. You can take a look at your office and say, what are non-performing employees costing me? But it's a simple math problem. The number of non-performing staff that you have, now these are non-managers, multiplied by their average comp, multiplied by 2.5. So I'm taking the low end of the 1 to 17 range. But you can see if I've got 10 people on my team that are not performing, and on average I pay them $50,000 a year, and I take that by 2.5, that could be a $2.5 million drain on your earnings, in probably even more on your cash flow, that you could be freeing up to, one, help you hire even better people, right? Stronger managers and leaders to surround yourself with, or to help you take more chances or more risks with your strategy, or hire better systems to help you execute. But this cost of people is really a big drag on companies. And with managers, it's even higher. So this is just kind of a simple formula, but what are your managers costing you? And think your managers are running your team of teams, so their impact is even more widespread. So I say, use 5.0 times the number of non-performing managers that you have, and you can see the cost can easily get up into several hundred thousand, easily get into the millions real quickly, depending on the size of your organization. So again, go to, grab a copy of this form, set the discipline with yourself and with your people, and you'll quickly be amazed at how much these bad hires are really costing us. Now, why do I share that with you? I share that with you because I want to drive the importance. Sometimes we get that, yeah, I need to surround myself with great people, Mark, to win, but it's kind of the pain associated with the dollars I'm shelling out to people that aren't cutting it in my organization. It sometimes takes that pain to take the action that's necessary to do something about it. And I'm gonna go through and share with you a process that only works if you have the discipline to follow it. And if you don't associate any pain with making bad hires, then you may not put the discipline in place to really make great hires. So let me give you just some real quick on the state of the American workforce. This is Gallup. They do a survey and they publish the survey. It's a global survey. This one, I'm looking at the American workplace, but you can see this number here. It says 33% on average of employees are engaged versus 70% in America's highest performing companies. So look at the delta. And I think of engaged as not just meeting the requirements of the job, but going above and beyond the requirements of the job, thinking about what can I be doing to anticipate opportunities, to anticipate problems, right? What do I think my boss needs? How can I anticipate those needs? So that's a big thing that I'm looking for in A players that are engaged. They don't need to be managed, right? They can anticipate your needs. And so that's what we're talking about, that engagement level. And 16% are actively disengaged. They don't even want to be working for your company. They're probably completely wasting their time and probably costing even more than the statistics I gave you earlier. Now, what's causing this disengagement? And some of you may decide to get out of the drop off my webinar here when I give you this news. Causation of disengagement is our fault. It's our fault. And I'm going to just share some things with you here. Listen to this. Only 21%, it's only 1 in 5, say their work is managed in a way that motivates them. So think about that. The great Steve Jobs said, managers get people to do things they don't want to do. Leaders inspire them to do things they never thought possible. It's our job to create an inspiring workforce where people want to be at work, where they're engaged with our mission. And the top 3 reasons are unclear expectations, ineffective feedback, and misplaced accountability. And I'm going to give you some tools today that'll help you with this. As well as the hiring, it's going to help you get your employees engaged. Now, let me wrap this section up with just 3 other statements that I want you to think about as you think about your team. Only 22% of employees strongly agree the leadership of their organization has clear direction. So this is on us to be able to communicate, where are we going? When we talk about strategy, right, it's being able to get that strategy down to that frontline workers so they have a sense of purpose and they have line of sight in how their work has bigger meaning in the organization. Hopefully you've got a strong purpose as an organization and they see their work helping you achieve your mission, delivering on that purpose. Only 15%, 1 in 6, of employees strongly agree the leadership of their organization makes them enthusiastic about the future, right? The biggest way to zap people of their motivation is to take away a compelling future. And only 13% of employees strongly agree that leadership communicates effectively with the rest of the organization. So in summary, your non-performing employees are costing you a lot of money. You're the problem. I know you didn't want to hear that. I'm sorry. But there's tools, training, and systems that can help. And so the rest of today, this next 45 minutes, we're going to really talk about these systems and how they can help. So when we talk about an A-player strategy, what we're talking about is a constant and never-ending improvement process that's about developing A-players. And there's 5 key components. And I'm going to go through all these today in varying degrees of detail. But number 1 is the job scorecard. And you're going to hear me talk about the job scorecard over and over and over again. It's the foundational principle piece. Jeff writes about it extensively in his book, Who. I'm going to give you some great stuff to think about on this call. I've given you some sample forms. I've given you a form, a template you can take and work from Jeff's website to help you create your own job scorecard. And I've given you a sample that I create for my clients to help them create a job scorecard. Number 2 is we got to hire and manage, right? So develop the job scorecard, hire and manage against what? Well, against the job scorecard. And I'll show this to you in a minute. Engage new hires against the job scorecard. So that onboarding process is oftentimes overlooked, but it's a critical component. They say that one of the most stressful days for an adult is the day they start a new job. So do you have an intentional strategy to, as quickly as possible, get them comfortable, get engaged with your culture, get them the tools and everything they need to be successful so they can get off and running and get ramped up to productivity for you? Measure new hire performance every 90 days against the job scorecard. This is about getting new hires engaged in the work. And then the last segment here is to measure. Measure, is this process working? Are we making better hires? Are we reducing turnover? Are we converting more of our new hires to A players? So we must measure, and we must take that measurement and use it to refine it. And you might say, Mark, what do I refine? Refine it all. Refine the scorecard. That's going to be a constant tweaking to get that scorecard right. Refine your interviewing approach. I'm going to give you some ideas to think about there. Refine that onboarding. And the only way you can get better is to measure and get some feedback. What's working, what's not working, where do we need to raise the bar to get better? So the WHO method is really based on 4 key aspects. Well, there's that scorecard again, right? So we're going to talk about scorecard. But then how do I source talent? I'm going to spend a little bit of time on that. How do I select? That's our hiring process. I'm going to spend some significant time there. And then how do I sell this A player that I'm the best place for them to come? Because A players have options, right? You're not the last job out there. So we need to be thinking proactively, how do I convince that person to enthusiastically want to take the offer that I'm going to make for that individual? Okay, so let me go to the scorecard. Now I've got a copy of this in the link that I provided. It's in the chat section, and I gave it to you at the beginning of the webinar. And I believe it was in an email that my assistant sent out as well. But here's what the scorecard looks like. Now, I like to keep it simple. And a lot of people on this call are going, Mark, but we've got job descriptions. And job descriptions are better than nothing. But here's the problem with the job description. With the job description, I mean, I've seen job descriptions that are 2 and 3 pages long. They're list after list of all the stuff we want. It kind of reminds me of throwing everything in but the kitchen sink. What I want to challenge you to do is to get this scorecard on a page, on 1 page. You say, but Mark, I mean, I got my people, there's a lot of different stuff that we do. I mean, I get it. But what we want to focus on in our interview are the meaningful specifics. What are the specific things in this job that really matter? And let's let the trivial mini go. Let's get really focused on what's most important. And so this document describes exactly what we want a person to accomplish in the role. It's not a job description, but a set of outcomes and competencies that define a job well done. So let me give you some more data. So the components. It starts with the purpose of the job. Okay, so what is the main purpose? Why does that job exist? And it should be written in plain English. It should be a sentence or 2. Not a paragraph, a sentence or 2. Especially if you're just getting started with this. Less is more. And some of you are gonna struggle with this. And you've got job descriptions today that are really, really long, but I want to challenge you to keep it simple. In fact, I've got a peer coach. When he first starts with a client, he gives them a 3x5 card and he makes them write this on a 3x5 card. He said it just forces them to think through the meaningful specifics and let the trivial mini go. So I'm going to do it in my way. I'm going to say a sentence or 2. I've given you an example down here at the bottom. So a VP of sales, it might be double revenue through raving fan clients in 3 years. That's your purpose, right? I mean, that's it. That's what we need you to do. That's what this job's about. We need you to double sales. It's clear, it's compelling. Now I know every job's not that specific, but challenge yourself to get it down to a sentence or 2. The second area are the functional accountabilities. Now, functional accountabilities are what a person needs to accomplish. Typically 3 to 8. If it's the first time doing one of these, you see on my form, I think I have room for 5. I know I put 3 to 8 in my PowerPoint slide, but I'd really like you to keep it to 5. And what are the outcomes that you need this person to deliver? So I went back to my VP of sales. You know, I need you to build a team of A players. I need you to deliver on $1 million annual sales target. And I need you to deliver new clients that carry an NPS, that's a net promoter score, that's a measure of satisfaction of at least 50. So the idea is I want clients, but I want the right clients, right? Those are the 3 things I need you to do. Now, there's a lot of other stuff that comes with the job. They got to show up for meetings. They may have to forecast. They may have to do other stuff. But these are the ones that are most critical. You deliver on these, and I'm flexible on the other stuff. So think about your non-negotiables, right? Think about those big, a lot of people have heard of the 80-20 rule. These are, if you get these done, they're going to bring 80% of the result to me in the organization in this role. But this gives you a place to write them. Now you'll notice on my form that I have a rating in there and I have a comment. So I use this to hire against as well. So as people are interviewing, they're rating, and I'll get to that here in a minute. Here's a key principle to think about. Set the outcomes high, but still reasonable, and you'll weed out, you'll scare away the B and C players. See, A players crave clarity and accountability. B and C players hate it. They love to pivot. They love to divert. They love to distract, right? So you're going to scare them away. You start to weed them out of the process right here when you get real clear by documenting what these things are. Skills, traits, and competencies. Again, I've got a spreadsheet I give my client. I don't know what's on there, 30 to 50 competencies. And the challenge is we read through it and they're like, oh my God, I want all of them. I mean, I want all these. Well, of course you do. But what are the 5 to 7 competencies that really make a difference for this job, right? Force yourself as a hiring manager to make some trade-offs, to pick those vital few for this job. And then document them here. What are those skills and competencies that they need? So for a sales leader, they need to be able to recruit. They need to be able to motivate. They've got to have great people skills. They've got to be a good presenter and probably communicate well. Think strategically, a strategic thinker. Think about those skills and competencies for the job. Oh, and then the last section down here that I don't have a slide for is their core values. Think about what the core values of your company. We want to hire for those core values. And then if you've got metrics and KPIs that align with the functional accountabilities, get them in here. So, you know, the more specific, clarity is power. The more specific, the more you're going to attract A players, the more you're going to repel B and C's right from the beginning. So don't be afraid that, well, Mark, I'm not exactly sure. I mean, get in here what you want. You can always adjust these as the role changes. You can adjust, but get really clear during the hiring process. This will also help you during onboarding. Now, when I think about skills and traits, I love Pat Lencioni. He's written a book called The Ideal Team Player, and he said the ideal team player is humble, hungry, and smart. And I love that kind of ideal behind that. And so I've got several clients that have adopted that as one of the, you know, when you think about those core competencies, we're looking for hungry, humble, and smart, and then they build a few others around it. So this thing doesn't need to be overly complicated. We just need to get clear on what we're looking for. And when we do that, we're going to have a higher probability that we find those people. So let's go back to my Gallup survey that I talked about earlier. And I said that, you know, the state of the American workforce is, you know, people aren't engaged like they need to be. And look at what the scorecard benefits provides and think back of how these match up against the challenges that I talked about earlier. It provides clear direction, right? Where are we going? What's your purpose? What do I expect? It outlines expectations. It defines accountability. You know, it inspires by communicating purpose. And then most importantly, it removes surprises during reviews. See, when you can get crystal clear on what you expect out of somebody, then you empower them. And now they can work autonomously. They don't need you hovering over them, and they can self-manage. And there's nothing, think about you when you were starting out in your career, there's nothing that was probably more freeing that caused you to be engaged in your work than when your manager left you alone, and let you do things your way, but with an expectation of what the results need to be. And that's what this scorecard helps us do. So scorecards are written objectives, 200 CEOs. We're asked how many of you have written objectives for all your direct reports, and only about 10% did. We know this because you talk to people on your team and they don't have these written, and you ask where they've come from, and they didn't have them written. So you immediately begin to differentiate as a potential employer, as a hiring manager, when you can create this kind of clarity. Okay, I've talked a lot about the scorecard, maybe more than I needed to, but it's the foundational component, right? The great Stephen Covey said, begin with the end in mind. What do you need out of this person? It starts with getting clear on what you need out of them. Then we got to find these people, right? We want them coming in the door. And so I'm going to spend just a minute or two here, but who is an A player? I said this earlier. An A player is someone in the top 10% of the available talent pool that's willing to accept your specific offer. So this isn't about you're paying $30,000 a year for this job, you need to go pay 60. Although some of you may be well served to pay more and get more return, right? It used to be all about cheap labor, used to be the mantra. Well, today it's about smart talent. Things are moving too quick. You need people that can be empowered. So I'm not saying you have to, but there may be an opportunity to pay a little bit more and raise your standards of expectations of what you expect out of the people you hire. How does an A player act? I shared this a couple minutes ago. Number one, they do not need to be managed. Said another way, they anticipate your needs. Number two, they consistently wow the team with their results and with their perspective. And number three, they live your values, right? They live what you live. They're the person you like having in your organization because they make your organization better. They're not toxic. They're not filled with drama, right? We call those toxic A players, people that perform, but they're filled with drama and toxicity. You want to look for people that perform, that make your culture better because they show up in it. So sourcing. So generating a flow of A players. The most important job of a CEO or of a hiring manager is recruiting top talent for your company. Okay, it's the most critical thing. If we're not getting good people, it's impossible to win. And this is a play on the Alec Baldwin movie. But instead of always be closing, we're saying always be recruiting, right? Always be recruiting. So how do we do this? And this is laid out in Jeff's book, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this. But the key principle I want you to take away is to always be asking for referrals. You know, listen, folks, we're at record unemployment right now. The war for talent is over. Talent has won, right? Social media, Glassdoor, LinkedIn, power has moved from the employer to the employee. Your employees have options, especially smart ones, especially those that you want to hire. They've got options, and they can learn more about you before they ever come in for an interview than they could 10 or 15 years ago. So we got to really recruit in a different way. And so I really encourage you to think about your network and how can you better activate that network to bring you sources of good people. And good managers are always looking for A players. If they don't have a spot, they don't wait until the spot becomes open to start recruiting. They recruit, find great people, and then make a spot for that great person. So be thinking about this as you go forward. So there's a bunch of different ideas here on the screen. I'll send this to you in the follow-up, and you can read about it in more detail in Jeff's book. Okay, so I talked about scorecard. I talked about sourcing. Let's get into the fun part. So now we've got some candidates. I mean, this is great. Now, how do I take them through a process and vet out that I'm getting the right one? Because what we don't want to happen is that we end up with the wolf in sheep's clothing. And if you're honest with yourself, I bet this happened to you more than once. You went through this interview process. You're like, I love this person. They show up to work on Monday and you're like, oh my God, where did you come from? Are you a twin? Go back. I want the person that I was interviewing. That's who I want to come in here and work for me. And the challenge is because most of us don't have a disciplined process that we follow, right? So we interview people, they come in and we connect with them. We're like, oh my God, we like them. We get confirmation bias. Everything that they tell us says, oh, they're going to be great. They're going to be great. They're going to be great. We hate interviewing. We hate having the open spot. So we're dealing with pain. We want to get that spot filled as fast as possible. We overlook the red flags. We're like, that's really not that big a deal. And then they show up on Monday and they're not the person that we dreamed up in our head that we were getting. And this is a challenge. And so this process I'm going to talk about is going to really, really help you there. So there's, a lot of red flags. Candidate doesn't explain their past failures. They exaggerate. They take credit for the work of others, speak poorly of their boss, cannot explain job moves. This list goes on and on. People most important to the candidate are unsupportive of change. So if you're hiring leaders create change. Managers can barely manage change. We want leaders, we want A players that can help us drive change, getting better, responding to the marketplace. For managerial, the candidate has never had to hire or fire, seems more interested in comp and benefits rather than the job. They try too hard to look like an expert. These are all red flags that I'm sure you all have seen. And if I had time, I could have you put yours in the chat window here and we could probably have a good discussion around the red flags that you missed, that you wish you would have caught with some of your recent hires. But let's talk about the interviews and how they can help us minimize the probability of missing one of these red flags. So there's four kinds of interviews. Four kinds of interviews that we're going to talk about. There's a screening interview, there's a who interview, there's a focused interview, and there's a reference interview. Now, like any process, hiring is a process. The output we're looking for is A players. If you're hiring somebody that's going to be a direct report or part of your senior leadership team, you're going to want to take a lot of time in each of these sections. If you're hiring somebody that's in a direct employee role that you're going to pay $35,000 a year, you may shrink that a little bit. But I want to encourage you to go through all four of these, regardless of the job. The depth and the amount of man hours that are developed or devoted to that hiring process will scale depending on the importance of the job and the risk of somebody not working out in the job. So let's get into them. So the screening interview. The screening interview is a phone screen. It's typically less than 30 minutes. Personally, I like a 15-minute screening interview. The idea here is we want to weed out B and C players. We don't want to waste our time. And we want to talk to people that have potentials to be A players. Now, Jeff says 10 to 20% of people spoken to pass the phone interview. And I'm going to tell you from my personal experience, I will validate those numbers. And I've got a favorite recruiter here. Some of my clients have worked with him. And he wanted to flood me with interview or candidates that are going to show up at my door. And I would be like, no. I'm going to do my phone screen. And if they pass the phone screen, then I'll invite them in. And so this was a discipline. And I cannot tell you how many people I weeded out through that phone screen process. Once they're in your office, it's just, if you're like me, you feel obligated. They drove out, it's harder to cut the call short. On the phone, if it's not a fit, cut the call short. So develop the discipline of this phone interview. And here's some questions that you can use in the phone interview. What are your career goals? What are you really good at professionally? You know, what are you not doing? Or what are you not good at or not interested in doing professionally? And then my favorite question on here, and I highlighted this in red, is who were your last 3 to 5 bosses, and how will they rate your performance on a scale of 1 to 10 when I talk to them? It's a powerful question. And the reason we ask that question is, number one, we want to get the names and phone numbers. Now, some of my clients get phone numbers here. Some do it when they come in. But what we're letting people know is we're going to talk to your references, and we're going to want to know about your performance. So what do you think that does to B and C players? I mean, they turn around and walk out, right? They hang that phone call up. They're like, I'm not going to go on that. I don't have references that can get through that. You're immediately weeding out your B and C players. What are your A players saying? I can't wait to come in, man. My references will talk great about me, right? So this is a concept that Jeff talks about and his dad, Brad, talks about. It's called the threat of a reference check, TORC, T-O-R-C. It's a powerful principle, and lever it. Think of what these bad hires are costing you. You need every tool and asset in your corner to help you. This threat of reference check is a powerful strategy. And so it's as simple as, you know, Joe, hey, I look forward, hey, by the way, you know, who were your last 3 to 5 bosses? And I'm curious, what are they going to say about your performance on a scale of 0 to 10 when I call them at the end of our process? And it's just such a great question, and it gets it out on the phone before you've spent time with them coming into your office. Now, the rest of the questions on there, I mean, you know, play around with them a little bit and get a rhythm that works for you, that gets you. But what you're looking for, the people that coming in your office, are they good people? Are they potential A players? If they're a waste of your time, then something broke down here in the pre-screen. And by the way, some of my clients have HR do this. That's fine. Some have the hiring manager do it. That's fine. We're talking about the result. What's given us the highest quality candidates when you sit down belly button to belly button to do the interview. Okay, so that's the pre-screen. The next interview is called the Who interview. And the Who interview is a chronological walk. It's a chronological walk through a person's career, starting with their earliest position. Now, I'm going to modify that a little bit. So if you're hiring a senior person, hold on. But starting with their earliest position to today. So what I'm looking for is I'm looking for 5 questions for each position in the last 15 years. So this may be their last 3 positions. You know, if you're hiring a senior level person, if you're hiring an old person like me, you don't care what I did right out of college. So you know, but go back enough time that you can see some trends. So at a minimum, you want 3 jobs here. Ideally, you want 5, but 3 might be somebody that's been in a role for a really long time. But ideally, you want 5. So think 3 to 5 here. And here are the questions. What were you hired to do? What accomplishments are you most proud of? What were some of your low points? This question's powerful. This question's powerful. Don't overlook this question. It brings up a lot of stuff that'll help you learn about the candidate. What were the people you worked, who were the people you worked with? So who was your team? Who was your boss? And why did you leave that job? So it's a chronological move to the last 3 to 5 jobs. A lot of great discussion here. And you say, Mark, so what am I looking for? What am I looking for out of these questions? You're looking for patterns. You're looking for patterns, right? Patterns are the mother of prediction. And it creates data points that you can start seeing inconsistencies. You can start seeing, you know, if the person's always talking about the problem with their boss, boom, there's your red flag. Well, what happened to the job before that? Well, you know, the boss I worked for was, you know, he didn't get it. And what happened to the job before that? Well, the boss I worked for there, she didn't get it. You start to see those patterns that illuminate those red flags that say, you know what, I may not have that potential A player here. So let's get out of this process early let's certainly not go all the way and make this person an offer, right? We're looking for the past behaviors are the best predictor of future performance. We need to ask our questions in a way that allow us to really ferret out those past behaviors. I'm also a big fan of an assessment tool. There's a lot of them that are in the market today. I happen to offer one from Profiles International that's now part of Wiley, and it's called PXT Select. The thing I like about it is it allows me to create a profile for that employee or that job, for that job, and then measure that candidate's fit against that profile. So if you see here, Oliver Chase is only a 70% job fit. That would put Oliver as a potential yellow in my book that I'm not sure Oliver has what it takes cognitive wise as well as behavioral wise to be successful in this job. The other cool thing that this does is it gives me some interview questions that I can use based on where some potential watchouts might be for that candidate. So you see here on sociability, this candidate's more reserved than the model calls for. You know, it's giving me a heads up right here. It's telling me as a hiring manager to look for how willing this candidate's going to be to socialize when a task calls for it. And it even gives me some questions that I can ask during the interview to help make sure that this person can compensate for what might be a potential watch out in their behavioral makeup, right? We want to hire people that are a natural fit for the work that we're asking them to do. And the Profile XT can help us do that. It can also help us with onboarding. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. So the who interview. Now, I'm going to talk about the focused interview, but before I do, you might be saying, who's involved in the who interview? And again, it could be the hiring manager, it could be the hiring manager in HR, or it could be a team. But I recommend that everybody if you're going to have a team involved, that you all walk through that sequential questioning together. And I've got one client where HR asks all the questions and the hiring manager's observing and taking notes, jumps in where appropriate, but it gives them a chance to really read body language. Again, I'm gonna say I'm presenting a process here. Take it and then make it better, right? How's it gonna work better and help you increase the odds that you're bringing on A players? Now, the second or the third key type of interview is the focused interview. And this gives you a chance to get really creative and really do some deep dives with this potential candidate, depending on the role that you're hiring them for. And some of my clients do the sequential right after the who. Some will do the who, send them back, then bring them in for the sequential, or for the focused. You can do it, how you want. It depends on, are they traveling in from outside the state, or are they local? I mean, there's a lot of how big is the job? Again, all these things are going to play into it. So use your creativity here. But let's talk about the focused interview. So going back to the scorecard, what we're looking for is we're looking to interview for each of these key elements of the scorecard. So think about that for a minute. It's another reason to be specific. And if you notice on my form, I've got a rating right here, right? So at the end, I want the hiring manager to commit, how confident on a scale of 1 to 5 or 1 to 10, you decide what works for your company, but how confident are you that the person can really deliver $1 million worth of sales every year? How confident are you on a scale of 1 to 10 that this person can build a team of A players? How confident are you that they can effectively balance bringing new clients in with very high levels of client satisfaction, raving fans? How confident are you? And I want that hiring manager to sign off on a scale of 1 to 10 in each of these areas before we make that hire. So the focused interview is about taking each one of these functional accountabilities, each competency, and each core value, and spending dedicated time on that as such that you can give them a score. And a lot of my clients use teams here, so they'll break the interview up. So we've got a candidate coming in, I'm going to have you three focus on, these core competencies and this functional accountability. I'm going to have you over here, and they divvy up the interviewing process so that everybody has a role as they go through the process, and they're focusing on a specific area. And then it comes back to, here's the questions that you can ask then. So what is your biggest accomplishment in this competency or in this core accountability? What are your biggest mistakes, your biggest lessons learned? And then hiring managers must rate them. Now, this is the art of interviewing. And let me give you an example. At Southwest Airlines, I'm going to assume everybody on this call has probably flown or heard of Southwest Airlines. Part of their brand promise is a fun culture. I remember Herb Kelleher was asked, he's like, how do you create all these happy employees? And he goes, we don't create happy employees, we hire happy employees. So employees that were fun-loving and would get self-deprecating humor was important to Southwest Airlines. So one of their hiring strategies was during the hiring process, they would have these pilots that would show up all buttoned up in their suits, and they'd be waiting in a room to go into the interview, typically 5 to 10 of them in a room. And somebody from HR would come down with a pair of khaki shorts and a flowered Hawaiian shirt and say, hey, you're going to be here for a while. We want you to be comfortable. Go ahead and change. We got a changing room over here, and make yourself comfortable. And they did it because they wanted to read the body language. And people that acted like they were too good to do that, they would move into column B, and the ones that embraced it, they'd move into column A, and those in column A would continue in the interviewing process. And it was a way for them to create separation. So it was a strategy to help them say, is this the kind of person that's going to elevate the culture on a flight? So think about for your organization, and there's a ton of resources. I've got great questions. We can work to build a library of questions that you want your people to ask, or HR can help manage this. A hiring manager in your company or somebody in charge of talent development can manage this. The questions are powerful, right? And they need to be played with and tweaked. And that's why this is a continuous improvement process, right? We want to say, okay, we hired against this. Did we get an A player? And if not, what do we need to go fix in our hiring process? And so these interviewing questions and strategies can be a key component of that. So focused interview considerations, I kind of talked through this, but pre-assigned areas of focus by functional accountabilities, competencies, maybe watch outs that came out of the assessment if you use an assessment, or core values. Select members of the team assigned to specific areas. The interviews can be conducted individually, or they can be done in groups. Use your creativity, and then track your results. Track your results. Did I make a good hire? Yes or no? And if I didn't, where did it break down? Where did our process break down? And how can we make it better? Okay, so we've covered a lot. You may be thinking, man, Mark, this is some pretty robust stuff. And it is. Okay, again, if you're hiring somebody that's a part of the leadership team, executive team, somebody that's very strategic, you're gonna follow this process and dot every I and cross every T. If you're hiring somebody that's in a high turnover job, they're gonna be a barista at Starbucks, you simplify this. You boil this down to a 1 to 2 hour interview, and maybe you do it all in one interview. And maybe you hire them, because the investment in interviewing resources isn't worth the risk reduced. That's what we're paid to do as leaders, is to figure that out. But as in any good process, we're always looking at how do we make it better? How do we make it cheaper? So cheaper here is labor hours associated with running the process. And then how do we make it, how do we reduce the cycle time? So think about when the job comes open till we get somebody in the job. How do we balance those three levers? Low labor to do it, the highest quality A player as possible, and do it in as short a period of time as possible. And that's what we're always looking at. How do we get better in those areas? So last interview is the reference interview. Remember, the threat of reference check, we're asking that throughout the process. So we're just revalidating when they're talking about past jobs. Who did you work for? Who are they? What was their name? If I call them, when I call them, how will they rate you? Those are just fundamental throughout the process, right? Now you get down to reference time. I highly, strongly recommend that the hiring manager do this call. Some organizations use somebody else. I mean, it's your hire. They're coming onto your team. I can't stress this enough. But here's some questions to help you. What context did you work with this person? What were the person's biggest strengths? What were the person's biggest areas of improvement? There it is. How would you rate their performance on the job on a scale of 0 to 10? And what about their performance causes you to give that rating? So what was the rating and then why? What was it that prompted you? If it was high, what did they do great? If it was low, what happened? And then the person mentioned, remember we asked them during the early interview, what were some areas they struggled with? Here's a way to tie it back. The person mentioned they struggled with X on the job. Can you tell us more about that? It's a great way to go just a little bit deeper. And some companies are just going to give you to their HR people and they're only going to answer how long they were here, when they started, when they left. But no ask, no try. And try to get as much detail as you can. It's worth the effort on these reference checks. Okay, so we talked about the scorecard. We've talked about sourcing. We've talked about selecting. How are we doing so far? If I could see you, I'd love to get some positive feedback, but I can't, so I'm going to trust we're doing pretty good. The final step is we got to convince this person now to come on board with us. Right, to come on board with our company. And so that involves selling the candidate that this is the best stop or the best place for their next stop in their career. So some things to think about, sell the fit, the fit. I mean, you've taken them through a pretty extensive process. So hopefully you've gotten real confident in their fit with the organization. Sell the family, if they're coming in from out of town, especially, get spouse, kids, get them excited about what's going on in your city. Maybe have somebody local that can show them around, introduce them to the school districts, get them comfortable. Moving to a new city is a big, big, big decision. Sell the freedoms. A players don't like being micromanaged. If you don't have a culture of empowerment yet, make that a priority. Where people are empowered, you got freedom to get the work done in the way you best see fit. We're hiring you for your unique skills and talents. Now, there's going to be accountabilities, right? Delivering the results along the way. Empowerment doesn't mean I tell you to go do something and I never check up. It's trust but verify. Trust but verify. This is all the stuff we do as part of the scaling up process. Sell the money they can make. We don't want money to be the primary concern, but let's face it, if you're scaling your organization, they should have an opportunity to participate and grow their career with you. So don't hesitate if that's available to sell it. And then sell the fun. We work a third or more of our time. We spend time at work. If you have a fun culture, and hopefully you do, sell it. Let them know it's a great place to work. So make sure you think about what are their hot buttons, what's most important to this candidate, and if I positioned our company as a great fit for them, they see how this is going to be a great fit. Let me wrap up with just a little bit on onboarding. So now we've made a hire. Now what? Well, now we got to get them engaged, right? We need to get them onboarded. We need to get them engaged. So there's three things I want you to think about. I want you to think about their priorities. I want you to think about who, and I want you to think about the relationships. So the relationship with you is their leader. So priorities, let's use the scorecard and the PXT Select. There's a coaching report that comes with that. I've given you copies in the Dropbox folder if you want to see that. But what are you likely to find easy and hard? I mean, having this discussion early with that PXT Select is a great way to address head on some of these potential watch out areas. If somebody's kind of introverted, letting them see that, hey, that's shown up in your report. You're hired. You got the job. I'm here to help you be successful, but let's make a list of some of these areas that I need to help work with you to get you across the chasm so that you can get productive. Certainly any areas or concerns that came out of the interviewing process. Let's talk about who the most important people are for them to connect with in the organization. And then let's decide how you and I will work together. And here's this coaching report. I've given, a management tip, and this comes out of the coaching report that you can download and take a deeper look at. But again, we're looking for potential A players, those whose skill and will match our scoreboard, match what we're looking for. So let me close, and I'm going to open it up for some questions here. And those of you that need to drop at the top of the hour, I completely understand. It's 10:55 now. But we're looking for a constant and never-ending improvement process to developing A players. So it starts with this scorecard, starts with hiring, onboarding, engaging, measuring. But we're always tweaking. We're always refining. Those interviewing questions may need to be tweaked. Our scoreboard, or scorecard, may need to be tweaked. So this is a constant and never-ending process. In order for it to be that, we got to have a feedback loop. We got to have some data that's coming back that can help us. So here's some potential hiring metrics. How many submissions did we get? How many people applied for the job? How many went through the screening interview? How many made it to the who interview? How many made it to the focused interview? How many made it to the reference? And how many did we hire? And I'm looking for conversion rates at each of those. And, I want the screen, I want to screen a ton out. But once they get past that screen, man, I want a high probability or a high percentage of those making it all the way. If 3 make it through the screening process, I'd love to have 3 that we've got the option to make an offer to. And then you're the one in control, right? You've got options on who you're bringing into that job. Once hired, let's do a 90-day review and say, are they an A player? Do we think we have the potential A player that we believed we hired? Some lagging measures, cost of mishires. I talked about that earlier. How many do we lose in the first 90 days? That is a hiring mistake. If you lose them in the first 90 days, that's on you. You mishired somebody, right? That was a bad hire. First year turnover starts to go towards hiring, towards management, and then what percentage of our new hires are turning into A players? And that we may measure that after 6 months, after 12 months, but just put a stake in the ground and start measuring it and start reporting on that information. Here's a development checklist, and then I'm going to open it up for questions. Develop the scorecards. We spent a lot of time on that. Commit to some structure to your interviews. Establish some metrics, and get out there and hire some people that can really help your organization go where it needs to go, and then develop them. Right? A players need to be developed just like anybody else. I mean, their only potential when they come on board, it's your ability to develop them up that turns them into a true A player. And then measure, right? Get feedback, track your metrics. As an organization, track this stuff by department, by office. Data is power. Data is what enables us to predict and then refine. Constantly be tweaking and getting better and looking to get those numbers to work more in your favor. So I'm going to stay on and answer any questions that anybody might have. So if you haven't done so already, feel free to ask questions. If it's at the top of the hour and you got to run, I completely respect and understand that. I would encourage you to watch for an emailed evaluation. Our thanks for filling that out will be a copy of the deck as well as a recording webinar. You'll get the webinar for being on anyway, but you'll get a copy of the deck if you'll be kind enough to submit the evaluation. If you're interested in talking more, schedule up a follow-up discussion at my Calendly. You can just type Calendly /Mark Fenner, and you book something straight on my calendar, 30-minute phone meeting, it'd be great. Or if you're more comfortable, just shoot me an email or do it the old-fashioned way, man. Back when I first got into leadership, it was amazing. We actually use these phones to talk on them. I know we don't do that much anymore, but I do respond. So if you got to go, thank you. But it looks like I've got one question here. So let me see if I can remember how to run my site and get that question to come up. It's messing with me here. Where did my question go? After I told you to give me that question, now I'm this is what happens when my assistant's not here to help me. Oh, wait, is this it? Okay, here's a Q&A question. Okay, You have mentioned, and let me get my slide back up so that you all can see that. Let's see where to go. Here we go. So you're getting to experience a little bit of my amateur moment right here. Okay, so here's the question. You have mentioned that an A player is 80% plus. Is there a particular reason that that's the standard score? Is there wiggle room if potential is recognized in candidates for low leverage positions? Yeah, I'm gonna tell you that 80% is, it's metaphorical. We're looking for those top 20% that are willing to accept an offer that you're going to give for the work that you need done. And definitely, developing people up is a key part of this. And so think of when you hire for A players, you're really hiring for A player potential, because you've got to get them onboarded and you've got to get them successful in your culture. There's, we spend a lot of time in the focused interview hiring for culture fit, but there's still work to do to get them ingrained into the culture. So spend time, be intentional about that. And if you miss, the miss could be on the hiring or it could be on the onboarding. And, some onboarding processes are less than stellar, and there's an opportunity to really make that first impression. Think about when a person's gone through the interview and they show up and they're probably nervous taking the job and they're wondering, is it really everything I thought it was? Wow them. Think about creating wow on that first day. Here's a question. How do you balance keeping A players in their current role with proper compensation and then future promotions? So I would encourage you, and I don't know if this is the context of this question, but I would rather hire an A player, have them for a year and a half or 2 years, and lose them because they've got a better opportunity somewhere else, than to hire non-A players that stick around forever. Now, some people struggle a little bit with that, right? So we're balancing turnover with performance. But if you get good at hiring A players, if you get good at onboarding them, you're going to shrink that curve to productivity. And my argument is you're going to get more out of them over the long haul. Now, if you're a company that's growing, that's not typically as much of a problem because you've got growth opportunities that you can create within your company. But sometimes you can't. But don't let fear of losing them be a reason not to bring them in and enjoy the ride while they're there. The other thing that A players do is they raise the standards of others that are around them. So, you may lose them. You may not be able to keep them forever, but do your best. And, millennials want movement. There's been a lot of research done on this, and they're less likely to stay loyal for extended periods of time. And so I think this is putting pressure on us to get good at hiring and then get good at moving them up, finding creative ways to do that. And then if they need to move on, love on them and let them go. Chick-fil-A, one quick story. Chick-fil-A used to, way back in the day, they thought these high school kids were only going to work here for a year or two and then they're going to go off to college. Why do we care about them? Right? And then they reframed their approach and said, how can we help them get the best experience possible and help them grow as individuals for the year and a half, 2 years that they're here? And you know what they found? They found that because of that new approach, a much higher percentage of those high school students have stayed on with them for the long haul. Deloitte Consulting heard about it. They used to have people that came on board that were there for 3 or 4 years and they'd move on. So they kind of treated them like crud because they felt like they're gonna move on anyway. They reframed their approach, dramatically reduced turnover. So I may have given you more than you wanted, but I hope that answered your question. Okay, how do you best determine if you can convert a B player, to an A player, or if it's time to source someone else. The biggest thing I'd be looking for is I would be looking for attitude, and are they investing in themselves, and are they trying? If somebody's giving effort, if they're working hard and they're reading books, they're studying, they're learning, they're asking good questions, they take coaching and they apply it, I'll continue to work with that person for a long time. It's when they get defensive, it's when they quit learning, they're not investing in themselves, that, my patience starts to wear. So a great question there is just, do you want it? My friend Gino Wickman, he gave me the GWC. I love these questions. Do they get what's involved in the job or in the next level? Do they get it, right? And again, this comes back to our need as leaders to create that clarity. Do they get it? Number two, do they want it? Okay, do they want it? I mean, not everybody wants to grow and be promoted, and some people don't. They're comfortable in their position, and so if that's great, that's great. Leave them where they are. And then so get it, want it, and then the third is, do they have the capacity? Do they have the capacity? And so you can work those with the B player and saying, here's what I'm looking at. Do you really understand what's in this new job or in this next level? Do you want it? And then, do you have the capacity? Help me understand, why you feel you have the capacity. Put it back on them to sell you. Great question, man. We're getting some good questions here. Okay. And then let me see. How do you manage the conversations with A players that the role that they applied for, they aren't quite ready for? Well, this would be, so if they applied, let me see if I can cover it from two angles. One is an existing employee applying for that job. So go back to your job scorecard and think about the functional accountabilities. What do we need them to do? And do they have the experience doing it? If they're looking to move up, they may not, but that's okay, right? That's okay. We can develop them. And then number two, do they have the core competencies? So that's a place that you can really use those core competencies to help develop them. And this is where having access to some training resources and some other resources that can help you kind of manage and navigate that as a hiring manager and develop that person. Bring a coach in that can work with that person's another idea. Send them to training. Again, the focus today, to compete today, it's not about cheap labor. It's about smart talent. And we develop smart talent by investing in them. And so I would encourage you to think about that. If it's somebody that's applying for a job, in other words, they don't work for us today and they want to come in from the outside, then I would be loath to hire them if they're not a fit for that job. Now, if you think they're a great person, they fit your values and you want them in your company, then you could hire them for another job. Just be crystal clear on, take them back through that process of interviewing them around the functional accountabilities for that job. So they understand those functional accountabilities and what they're going to be responsible for if you bring them into a job different than what they hired for, and then get a development plan for them. So think about some key books, some key webinars, some key thought leaders. I mean, one of my favorite questions is, what thought leaders are you listening to? And back in my day, God, I'm going to sound like my dad here for a minute, but back in my day, we had to go buy tapes of thought leaders. And I remember driving around in my car, listening to these tapes, and it's all I listened to. And today, the resources that are available on the internet through podcasts and through YouTube and through Audible with online books, I mean, I just think there's just absolutely no excuse for somebody that wants to grow and develop in your company to not be plugged in to some kind of continuous learning rhythm. So I would encourage you to start to, as an executive in your company, to start to develop a library of what are those resources, and then plug in people into those resources so they can develop. And think about mindset, so training around attitude, leadership, those types of things, and then think about the technical aspects of your job as well. and who the thought leaders are, you know, technically to help them learn the nuances of your industry. Okay, I think this is my last question. So do you have any tips to assist in getting members of upper management engaged in the interview process and understanding its importance? Man, that is a great question. This approach, I'll tell you, on my client, I got a client right now with 650 employees, and nobody comes in that company at any role that's not interviewed first by one of the founders. There's 2 founders, and most of them, they both interview, but at a minimum, one of them has to interview. Now I'm challenging them a little bit as they scale beyond 650 and we get up over 1,000. Can they really interview everybody that comes through the door? And at some point, just because of bandwidth, they're probably going to have to push down. But you know what? It works today because they have so little turnover and they have such a great culture. So to answer your question, I would go back to the cost of turnover and what unproductive employees and managers are costing us, what mishires are costing us. I mean, that tends to speak pretty well in the C-suite. Don't just take my slide. Go do the research. You know, go pull down that Gallup survey. It's available on the internet. You can pull that up. Pull up. Go Get Smart. Brad Smart's top grading. He goes into a lot more detail on that than Jeff does in his book Who. So that would be a great resource. Go back and compute a few mishires that you've had in your company, and just start to think about, you know, what is this really costing us when we have a mishire, and see if you can get them bought into the importance of making good hires, and then how they play an important role in helping the company succeed. So great questions. Wow. Awesome. So that's it. So thank you very much. Again, if I can help, you know, schedule something on my calendar or shoot me an email. I appreciate you. Keep an eye out for future webinars. I'm going to do more sessions similar to this. I just really hope I made a difference and I gave you something that you can take away and apply to help you become more effective and bring in the kind of people that you need around you to help you achieve your goals, and more importantly, deliver on your purpose and your mission to your clients. So thanks for attending. Have an awesome day.